The rain had been falling for hours, soft and steady, painting the streets in silver streaks under the dim glow of the streetlights. Sundar Pichai sat alone at a corner table in a quiet Italian restaurant in downtown Mountain View. He wasn't there for business, for once. No meetings, no presentations, just a rare moment to enjoy a quiet dinner by himself. Or so he thought. He had ordered a simple pasta and a glass of water, ignoring the curious glances from the few diners who recognized him. He was dressed plainly dark jeans, a gray sweater, sneakers. He didn't want to stand out tonight, as. He sipped from his glass. His phone buzzed with a message from one of his senior managers. He glanced at it, ready to reply, when someone caught his eye at the far end of the restaurant. Just near the window where the rain tapped against the glass, sat a woman with 3 small children. She laughed softly at something. One of the kids said, her head tilted, her hair falling over her face the way he remembered so well. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be, but it was Meera, his ex-wife. The years had changed her. There were faint lines around her eyes now, a softness in her cheeks, but the way she smiled, the way she held her coffee cup with both hands, was exactly the same. It was like the world had shrunk, pulling a piece of his past into this tiny room, and then his gaze shifted to the children. 3 of them, identical boys. Same dark hair, same almond-shaped eyes, same faint dimple on the left cheek when they smiled. Sundar froze. He knew that dimple. Because it was his for a moment, the sound of the restaurant faded. The clinking cutlery, the low hum of conversations. The rain, all of it disappeared, leaving only the pounding in his chest. Meera hadn't seen him yet. She was busy helping one of the boys cut his pizza into smaller pieces. The other 2 were busy talking to each other, their little voices overlapping in a playful chatter. Sundar single quotes. As mind raced back to the last time he had seen her. It was 8 years ago. Their marriage had ended suddenly, painfully. There had been words said that could never be taken back, choices made that couldn't be undone. She had left, and he had buried himself in work, in building a life that left no space for memories. And yet, here she was, with children who looked like him. He told himself it was just a coincidence. Maybe they only seemed to look like him because of his own memories playing tricks. But deep down, something told him this was more than chance. He sat there, torn. He could stand up, walk over, and speak to her. Or he could finish his meal, leave quietly, and never open the door to a past. He had locked away. His fork hung in the air, untouched. The waiter approached with his pasta, but Sundar barely noticed. He was staring now, not at Meera, but at the smallest of the 3 boys, the one sitting closest to him. The boy had just turned toward the light, and Sundar saw something he couldn't ignore. On the boy's left hand, just at the base of the thumb, was a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. The same birthmark Sundar had. His hand trembled as he set the fork down. Meera finally looked up, and her eyes locked with his. For a split second, she froze. Her smile faded, replaced by a look he couldn't read: shock, guilt, maybe fear. She reached for her purse, as if ready to leave, but then one of the boys tugged her sleeve, saying something that made her glance back at Sundar, her eyes narrowing. She mouthed something to him across the room. He couldn't hear it, but he could read her lips. Don't. And then, without breaking eye contact, she stood up, took the boy's hands, and began walking toward the door. Sundar pushed his chair back, his pulse racing. He didn't know why, whether it was anger, confusion, or something else, but he knew he couldn't just let her walk away again. Not this time. He stood and just as he took his first step toward her, the youngest boy dropped a small blue notebook onto the floor. Sundar picked it up. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. On the first page, written in careful, childish letters, was a name, Arjun Pichai. The door closed behind them before Sundar could move. He stood there, holding the notebook, the sound of the rain suddenly louder. In his ears, and for the first time in years, Sundar felt something he thought he had buried forever fear. Asterisk Sundar stood frozen in the middle of the restaurant, the small blue notebook gripped tightly in his hand. The name written on it felt like it was burning into his skin. Arjun Pichai. There was no mistaking it. It wasn't just similar. It wasn't a coincidence. It was his last name. For a moment, his logical mind tried to step in. There could be another explanation. Maybe Mira had remarried someone with the same last name. Maybe the boy's name was a tribute to someone else. But deep inside, in that quiet place where truth doesn't need proof, he knew the waiter returned to ask if everything was all right, but Sundar barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the restaurant's front door, where Mira and the three boys had just disappeared into the rainy night dot without thinking. He rushed toward the door, pushing it open. The cold air hit his face, sharp and wet with rain. His eyes scanned the street, the sidewalk, the parked cars, but they were gone. It was as if the night had swallowed them whole. His heart pounded harder with every second. He walked quickly along the street, peering down the corners, searching for any sign of them. Nothing. The rain soaked through his sweater, but he didn't care. He finally stopped under the awning of a small bookstore, leaning against the glass, catching his breath. The notebook was still in his hand, the paper slightly damp from the rain. He opened it again, slowly this time, as if each page might reveal a piece of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. The first page was just the name. The second page was filled with messy, childlike drawings, stick figures holding hands, a big house with a garden, a man standing beside three smaller figures. Sundar's breath caught when he saw the man's hair in the drawing. It was black with a streak of gray on one side, just like his. He flipped through more pages. There were scribbles, numbers, little sentences written with uneven letters. But one page stopped him cold. It was a drawing of the restaurant they had just been in. The details were unmistakable. The round tables, the hanging lights, even the rain on the window. And there, drawn at the corner of the picture, was a man sitting alone at a table, wearing glasses. His glasses. He had never seen these children before, yet here they were, drawing him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him. It was a message from an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. "You shouldn't have followed us. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., cafe veranda, alone." Number, name, no explanation. But he knew who it was. He slipped the notebook into his bag and started walking back to his car, his mind racing. There were so many questions clawing at him. Why hadn't Mira told him? Why now, after all these years? And most of all, were those boys really his sons? The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light, every quiet stretch of road felt like it was forcing him to sit with the questions he wasn't ready to face. When he got home, he placed the notebook on his desk and just stared at it for a while. His apartment was silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't open his laptop. Instead, he sat there, thinking about the life he had built, the sacrifices he had made, and the past he had tried so hard to leave behind. Sleep didn't come easily that night. He kept imagining the faces of the three boys, their smiles, the way the youngest had clutched the notebook. He kept remembering Mira's eyes, the warning in them, the unspoken words stopped by morning. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. Sundar got dressed simply again. Jeans, a dark jacket, no tie. He didn't want to draw attention. He grabbed the notebook and left, heading toward Cafe Veranda, a small place tucked away on a quiet street, not far from downtown Dock when he arrived. The cafe was nearly empty. Soft music played in the background, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. He chose a table near the back, where he could see the entrance. His fingers tapped against the notebook as he waited at exactly 10 a.m. The door opened. Mira walked in. She wasn't alone. The three boys stayed outside with a young woman who seemed to be their caretaker. Mira's eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. She took a deep breath and walked over, sliding into the seat across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The years between them felt like a heavy wall, but there was something else too. A current of tension, unspoken and sharp. Finally, Sundar broke the silence. Are they mine? His voice was calm, but there was a tremor underneath. Me looked down at her hands. You need to leave this alone, Sundar, she said quietly. For their sake. For yours. That's not an answer, he replied, leaning forward. If they are my sons, I deserve to know. She glanced toward the window, where the boys were playing on the sidewalk. It's not that simple, she said. You think the truth will make things better, but it won't. It will only hurt them. And you. He studied her face, searching. For any hint of the woman he had once known, the woman he had loved, why didn't you tell me? Yes, she met his eyes then, and for a brief second, he saw something there. Regret, maybe even pain. But it vanished quickly. Because you weren't ready, she said, and because someone didn't want you to know. His stomach tightened. Someone? Mira nodded slowly. You're not the only one who's been looking for them. Before he could ask what she meant, the bell above the cafe door jingled again. A man in a dark coat walked in, scanning the room. When his eyes landed on their table, he smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. Me, single quotes, as face went pale. She whispered, you need to leave, now. The man began walking toward them, his eyes fixed on Sundar like a predator spotting its prey. The man's steps were unhurried, almost casual. Yet there was something deliberate in the way he moved. Something that made Sundar's instincts tighten like a coiled spring. He wasn't tall, but there was a weight in his presence, the kind that filled a room without sound. His coat was dark, his collar turned up, and a faint scar ran from his jawline to just under his ear, catching the morning light for a moment. Before disappearing into shadow. Single quotes as hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. Don't speak, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the cafe. Don't ask questions. Just leave. But Sundar didn't move. His eyes were locked on the man's, and something about the way those eyes studied him, calm, assessing, as though measuring every possible outcome, told him this was no chance encounter. The man reached their table and stopped. Mr. Pichai, he said, his tone smooth, almost polite. I've been wanting to meet you. Sundar didn't respond immediately. His mind raced, replaying Mira's words from just moments ago. You're not the only one who's been looking. For them, the man glanced at Mira, a small smirk tugging at his lips. You should have kept your distance, he told her. You knew what would happen if you didn't. This isn't the place, Mira said sharply, her voice trembling, despite her effort to sound firm. Not in front of him. On the contrary, the man replied. He's the reason I'm here. A silence settled over the table, heavy and cold. Sundar felt the faintest tremor in his fingertips, but kept his expression steady. Who are you? He asked finally. Someone who's been cleaning up your mess for a long time, the man said. And now, unfortunately, you've stepped back into it. Mira's eyes flicked toward the window, where the three boys were still playing outside, unaware of the tension coiling inside the cafe. They don't know, she said. And they can't. The man leaned in slightly, his voice low. That depends on him now. He jerked his head toward Sundar. Every nerve in Sundar's body screamed for clarity. But the air between them was thick with unspoken rules. He could feel that if he pushed too hard, too fast, something would break. And maybe not in his favor. The man straightened and slid a small, folded piece of paper onto the table. You have until tomorrow night to decide how much you want to be involved, he said. After that, things move forward without you. Then, without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out of the cafe. The bell over the door jingled, and just like that, he was gone. Sundar stared at the paper for a moment before slowly unfolding it. There was an address scrawled in neat handwriting, and beneath it, 2 words that made his stomach drop. Ask no. 1. Nira reached for the paper, but Sundar pulled it back. What is this? He demanded. Trouble, she said softly. The kind you can't fix with money or influence. The kind you should walk away from and leave them. Sundar's voice was sharper now, the restraint beginning to crack. Leave them without knowing if they're mine? Mira looked at him, then really looked, her eyes glassy with something between anger and sorrow. If you go to that address, you'll get your answers, she said. But once you do, nothing will ever be the same again. Before Sundar could respond, one of the boys burst through the cafe door, laughing, his small shoes squeaking against the floor. Nana, come. See, he called. Waving his hands excitedly, Mer stood quickly, brushing past Sundar. Stay here, she said without looking at him, then followed her son outside. Through the window, Sundar saw all three boys gathered around something at the curb. Their small figures framed against the cloudy sky. Then he saw it. A sleek black car, engine running, parked too close to the sidewalk. A man sat in the driver's seat, wearing dark glasses, watching the children with unnerving stillness. Sundar's pulse spiked. He pushed his chair back and moved toward the door. But before he could step outside, the black car's tires screeched against the wet pavement. The boys stumbled back as the car sped away, splashing water onto the curb. Era was shouting at them to stay close. Her voice tight with panic. Sundar reached the sidewalk, but the car was already a blur, disappearing around the corner. He turned to Mira, ready to demand an explanation, but she shook her head, her face pale. It's starting, she said quietly. And now you're in it whether you want to be or not. Her words hung in the damp air, and for the first time since last night, Sundar realized something chilling. This wasn't just about family or the past. Someone was watching, and someone didn't want him to find the truth. Asterisk that night. Sundar sat alone in his apartment, the folded paper with the address lying on the table in front of him. The city lights blinked faintly through the rain-streaked window, casting shadows across the room. He hadn't turned on the TV, hadn't checked his phone. He couldn't. His mind was a storm of images. Mira's pale face, the three boys' identical dimples, the scarred man's voice like quiet steel, and the black car speeding away. From the curb. The address on the paper was written in clean, deliberate strokes, as though whoever had penned it wanted to make sure there was no doubt about where to go. Ask no one. The words beneath seemed less like advice and more like a threat. He picked up the paper, turning it over as if the back might hold some hidden clue. Nothing. His thoughts drifted back to years ago, when he and Mira were still married. He remembered the small apartment they had shared, the late-night talks about starting a family, the quiet mornings when she would hum softly while making tea. They had been in love once, the kind of love that felt unshakable, until work consumed him. Deadlines, deals, endless flights. The gap between them had widened, and by the time he realized it, she was gone. But now, there was a possibility that she hadn't just left with her own life. She had left carrying a part of his. Sleep never came. By the time the sky began to lighten, Sundar had made up his mind. He would go to the address. The location wasn't far. A quiet, older neighborhood on the edge of town. As he drove through, the winding streets, the houses grew larger but more worn, their paint faded, gardens overgrown. The air here felt heavier, still damp from last night's rain. He finally pulled up to a tall iron gate. Beyond it stood a sprawling, weathered house, its windows dark. Ivy clung to the stone walls, and the driveway was empty. There was no name on the mailbox, just the number from the paper. He pushed the gate open slowly. It groaned on its hinges, the sound echoing faintly in the stillness. Inside the yard. The grass was long and untamed, brushing against his shoes as he walked toward the house. His every step felt louder than it should, the quiet pressing in on him. At the front door, he hesitated. The wood was scratched and scarred, the brass handle cold beneath his fingers. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. A moment later, the door creaked open. Not all the way, just enough for him to see a shadow in the dim light beyond. You came, a voice said. It wasn't the man from the cafe. This voice was softer, female, but there was something strained in it. Like someone carrying too much for too long. The door opened wider, revealing a woman in her late 50s. Her eyes were sharp, studying him quickly before glancing over his shoulder at the empty street. Come in. He stepped inside and the smell hit him immediately, a mix of old wood, paper, and something faintly medicinal. The house was cluttered but not dirty. Stacks of books lined the hallway. Photographs in mismatched frames hung on the walls, their glass dusty. The woman led him into a small sitting room where the curtains were drawn, letting in only a thin slice of light. Sit, she said, gesturing to a worn armchair. Sundar sat, his hands clasped. Who are you? Someone who knew your father, she replied, and someone who knows what's happening now. The mention of his father startled him. My father's been gone for years, he said carefully. She nodded. Yes, but before he died, he made arrangements for certain people to be kept safe. What does that have to do with me? The woman's gaze sharpened. It has everything to do with you. And with those boys? The air seemed to thicken. They are mine? Her expression softened slightly. By blood, yes. But they've been under protection for reasons you don't yet understand. He leaned forward. Protection from who? She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway as if checking for someone. From the people who destroyed your father's life? The same people who don't want you near those children now. Before he could respond, there was a sudden noise outside. The deep growl of an engine pulling up fast. The woman's face went rigid. They found you, she whispered. You need to leave now. But it was too late. Asterisk, the sharp crunch of footsteps on gravel came from the front yard. The sound of the iron gate slamming shut. And then a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, like the man on the other side already knew he had all the time. In the world, the woman's voice was barely a breath. If you open that door, everything changes? Sundar stood, his pulse hammering, staring at the door as the knocking came again. Asterisk. The knock came again, slow and deliberate, each strike on the wooden door echoing through the dimly lit room like a countdown. Sundar felt the muscles in his back tense, the air in the house suddenly heavier, harder to draw into his lungs. The woman stood perfectly still, her hand hovering in midair as though she might gesture for silence, but thought better of it. Her eyes, wide, dark, alert, didn't leave the door. Don't answer. She whispered, her voice so low he had to lean forward to catch it. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew steadier, not louder, just patient. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't here to be invited in. They were here because they believed they already had the right. Sundar's mind ran through possibilities. It could be the scarred man from the cafe. It could be someone else entirely. But the precision of the knock, the calm pace, made his skin crawl. Then came the voice. Mr. Pichai, we should talk. It was the scarred man. The same low, controlled tone, but this time there was no polite introduction. Only the certainty of someone who already knew the answer to his request. The woman moved quickly now, stepping towards Sundar. There's a back door, she said, her words clipped with urgency. You can still get out before she could finish. The knock turned into a single, solid thud. Not on the door, on the wall just beside it. A warning, Sundar's breath quickened. The woman grabbed his wrist and pulled him toward the hallway, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. They passed his books and closed doors, their footsteps muffled by an old rug. But before they reached the back of the house, another sound stopped them cold. Footsteps outside the windows. Not one set, more, moving in unison. The woman let go of his wrist, her face pale. They've surrounded the place. He looked toward the back door. Through the thin curtains, he saw the faint outline of a figure standing just beyond the porch. Motionless. There was no way out. The knocking stopped. And for a moment, the silence was worse than the sound. Then the front door creaked open. The woman's eyes widened. He has a key, she said under her breath. Like she'd just realized something that made her blood run, cold, heavy, deliberate. Footsteps moved into the hallway. A shadow slid along the wall before them, stretching long and thin under the faint light. The scarred man appeared in the doorway to the sitting room. His coat still damp from the mist outside, his eyes locked on Sundar. "You've been asking the wrong questions," he said. "And you've been talking to the wrong people." "I want answers," Sundar said, his voice steady even as his pulse raced. "Are they my children?" The man tilted his head slightly, like he was considering how much to give away. "That depends on whether you're ready to know the rest of the story." "What story?" The man's gaze flicked briefly toward the woman, then back to Sundar. "Your father didn't die because of illness. He died because of them. And those boys, they are at the center of the same thing." Sundar felt the words hit him like a blow. "What are you talking about?" The man stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "There are people who would do anything to control them. Their bloodline, their future. You think this is about family? But it's about power." The woman suddenly moved between them, her arms out as if shielding Sundar. "Stop," she said. "You'll put him in danger before he even understands." But the man only smiled faintly. "It's too late for that. They've already been marked." "Marked?" Sundar repeated, his voice rising despite himself. "What does that mean?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. He tossed it onto the table beside Sundar. "This is where you'll find the first truth. Go there tonight, if you want answers. But know this, once you go, there's no going back." Sundar's eyes stayed on the envelope, the paper slightly crumpled, the edges damp from the rain. "And if I don't?" "Yes, Dot," the man's smile faded. "Then you'll watch from a distance while someone else decides their future." The woman's hand gripped Sundar's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Don't go," she said. "He's leading you straight into the fire." The man turned and began walking back toward the door, his footsteps unhurried. Before leaving, he looked over his shoulder. "Midnight? Be there?" The door clicked shut behind him. Sundar stood in the center of the room, the envelope in his hand now, feeling its weight as though it contained more than paper. He thought of the triplets, of Mira's guarded eyes, of the black car that had watched them from the curb. He didn't know why, but he could feel it. Whatever waited for him tonight would not only change his understanding of the past, it would decide the course of the future. Asterisk. The hours between sunset and midnight felt like an eternity. Sundar sat in his apartment, the envelope on the table in front of him like a living thing, daring him to open it early. But he didn't. Something in the scarred man's tone had made him certain. Whatever was inside was meant to be read only at the appointed time. He tried to work, to distract himself, but the minutes dragged. Each tick of the clock pulled him closer to the moment when he'd have to decide whether to walk into the unknown or turn away forever. When the clock finally struck 11, he couldn't sit still any longer. He grabbed his jacket, slipped the envelope into his pocket, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city was quiet at that hour. The streets washed in the pale orange glow of street lamps. The address inside the envelope led him far from the center of town, past industrial warehouses and old empty train yards. The road narrowed, lined with tall fencing and broken signs. Finally, he saw it, a small, abandoned railway station, its paint peeling. The windows dark, a single light glowed from inside, faint but steady. He parked a block away and walked. The rest of the distance, his shoes crunching softly on the gravel. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness. When he pushed the station door open, the hinges groaned. The inside smelled of dust and old wood. The light came from a single lamp, placed on a table in the center of the room, and sitting beside it, with his hands folded, was the scarred man. "You came?" the man said, not looking surprised at all. "I want the truth," Sundar replied. "All of it." The man gestured to the chair across from him. "Then sit." Sundar took the seat. The man reached under the table and slid a small box toward him. "Open it." Inside the box was a stack of documents. Birth certificates, hospital forms, photographs. Sundar's breath caught when he saw the first page. Father's name, Sundar Pichai. Children, Arjun Pichai, Araf Pichai, INPIC, there was no space. For doubt now. They were his sons. His throat tightened as he looked at their photographs. The boys at different ages, smiling, playing, sometimes with Mira beside them, sometimes not. In one picture, the youngest was holding that same blue notebook. Why? Sundar asked, his voice low. Why keep this from me? The scarred man leaned back. Because your father made enemies. Powerful ones. When he died, those enemies turned their attention to you. And when Mira found out she was pregnant, she knew the boys would be targets too. Hiding them was the only way to keep them alive. Sundar's chest felt heavy. Who are these people? Business rivals, political players, people who see children like yours not as family but as leverage. Your father's bloodline comes with certain rights and certain obligations. Those boys could inherit more than just a name. They could inherit control over things some people would kill to own. The room seemed colder now, the weight of the revelation pressing in. And you? Sundar asked. What's your part in this? I was tasked to protect them, the man said simply. But now that you've found them, that protection gets harder. People have noticed your interest. The car outside the cafe wasn't mine. Sundar's mind flashed back to the black vehicle, the figure inside watching the children. Then they're already in danger. The man nodded. Yes. But you have a choice now. Take them under your protection and accept the storm that comes with it, or walk away and let me keep them hidden. Either way, there's no halfway. Sundar didn't hesitate. I am their father. I won't walk away again. The scarred? Man studied him for a long moment, then gave a single nod. Then you'll need to earn their trust. They don't know the truth yet. And Mira, she fight you on this. Not because she hates you, but because she's terrified of what will follow. He slid another piece of paper across the table. An address, different from the one before. They'll be here tomorrow morning. You have until then to decide how to tell them. Once you do, there's no going back. Sundar took the paper, his mind already racing. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Sundar drove to the address, a quiet park on the edge of the city. From a distance, he saw Amira sitting on a bench, the three boys running in the grass nearby. He walked slowly, his heart pounding harder with every step. The boys were laughing, their voices carrying in the crisp air. They didn't see him yet that Mir looked up, and their eyes met. There was no anger in her gaze this time, only resignation, and something that looked like fear. She didn't tell him to leave. She knew it all. Sundar stopped a few feet away, watching his sons play. For a moment, he thought about all the years he'd missed, the birthdays, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories. He knew there was no way to reclaim them. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to be part of their future. And as one of the boys finally noticed him and waved, Sundar realized something. The storm was already here, but so was the reason to face it.